And tonight, I'm very happy to have a chance to get into uh, my movie idea, E3 and below. So those who are here live, I'm happy to get to rap with you about it, and we'll definitely jump in the chat in a little bit to check on comments and questions, critiques, etc. But essentially, the point of this video is to just do that. It is in light of all the admittedly my own wildly contradictory excitement around the Top Gun film and what it reminded me of and brought me back to in my own experience in the Navy, but then also specifically this idea that I've had for years and have thought about for years, and even in a creative writing class in undergrad tried to write about, but just have never, like with so many other ideas, have never followed up on. So I thought, I talked about it this morning on the Remix Morning Show, so I figured let me just get into it a little bit and see what's what. So I dug up some notes, some visual aids, albeit I not all of them, couldn't find everything. So obviously this is something we can come back to or whatever. But I just want to say off the top that, look, if anybody out there wants to take and run with this idea, there's no need to front or bite or attempt to cut me out. I just want an adequate percentage. Cut me in, let me work with you on it, and let's make this thing happen. Because the idea, the broader concept, I'm convinced is phenomenal. And if there's a way to actually turn this into something like it's a legit movie, which obviously I'm not looking at in terms of Hollywood or Netflix, although I don't know, but anyway, we'll get into all that, but I'm just saying, I'd be happy, I'll come in and be as advisor, help with the writing, with the authenticity, what, anyway. But anyway, otherwise, let's just have fun with it here. That's good enough for me. So, okay, so E3 and below, the title. As I mentioned earlier, the title E3 and below comes from the ranks in the Navy, ranking in the Navy, and the particular cutoff break between E3 and E4. So when you first join up and go to boot camp, usually you're E1. Sometimes you get bumped right up to E2 because of some score you got. I think because of the way I came in, and I don't know, like anyway, you sometimes come in as an E2, but when you get to which are seamen, or I don't know what they call them anymore. I don't know if that name has changed. If there's been some advances in terms of gender, but you come in as an E2, E1, and then you become an E3. You get to at your duty station usually. And then you're usually working with people you've either gone to boot camp with or shown up with at your duty station, or people who have this, your peer group per se, age-wise, experience-wise, for the most part. And then just as normally happens, people have either it's ambition or luck or favoritism or whatever, and they take the test to become a petty officer, and they take that first leap from E3 to E4, which becomes, at the time I was in, they talked about this being, again, this was the rank at which you take the biggest economic leap in your career. So no matter how high apparently that you would advance, the difference in pay never took a bigger jump between E3 than between E3 and E4. But what I also think of it as is that it's also the first time people start to get some kind of legit authority over other people. Now it's usually for menial tasks, like in my case it was the E4, and when I became an E4, which is as far as I got, you oversee people in terms of who do the most menial tasks. So I would go until I would be given the like for instance, I was in charge for a time of the passageway that led up to the ship's armory. That meant its cleanliness was my responsibility. So that meant the E3s beneath me, I could tell to make sure it was swept and buffed and mopped and all that kind of stuff. But it's also the time where people you were just yesterday in a peer group with, you're now telling them what to do. So it starts to change the social dynamic, even among, again, friends, people you've even gone to boot camp with, and so on and so forth. So, and then usually what you would hear when people would call out duties and privileges, you would hear such and such a rank, such and such a rank, such and such a rank get to do this, such and such a rank get to do this. And then E3 and below, you all are over here doing the getting last, going last, getting the worst. So for a long time, I just kept hearing E3 and below over here, E3 and below. So I was like that. So I was like, that's a title. Anyway, so that's where the title comes from, E3 and below. And and over the years that I've been thinking about it, it's what I've wanted to see in a film, although again, contradict almost everything about my political analysis of media, including my Vernon philosophy of Black media avoidance. And the idea that nobody should be looking for themselves in film. I just have noticed that the version of my military experience, and I think of the majority people's military experience, is never really told. So for instance, when I was in the Navy, we used to marvel and make fun of the fact that, and I think it still may be true, that if you pay attention and look for it or have an eye attuned to it, you notice that in the background in movies, you see sailors all the time, even when the military has nothing to do, at least officially, with the plot. Now, I know a lot of that is propaganda, is messaging, but at the time, we used to just have a lot of fun pointing out, oh, there's the squid, as you know, might call, you know, the sailor. There's or Ricky recruit coming fresh out of boot camp. You know, that's them in you know, but what I notice is that usually when you see films that involve the military, either they're dealing with officers and, like in Top Gun, with pilots and all that elite, or special forces and special teams and all the SEALs and all that fancy stuff. Or if you see the grunts or the E3 and below, if you see them, they're playing menial roles in the background. They're there as cannon fodder, getting blown up or drowned, or, you know, you might get one, you know, that one character where you get that little bit of a story, so you feel sad when you see him die, or, you know, like, but what the actual experience is, you just don't see. And then I remember when Anton Fisher came out, and a lot of people said, well, this is a legit experience of a, you know, and I know it was based on a true story. I still didn't find it realistic, because it of course included I think an officer. He may have been a chief, but I think Denzel was an officer. It involved an officer coming in to save this brother's life. And I even never heard of anything like that, much less saw it happen. So that was a very rare. And even then, I don't remember the film really getting into what the lived experience is for enlisted ranks in the military. So I'm happy to be corrected on this. Obviously, put it in the comments, as they say, or contact me and let me know, or I'll check the chat if anybody has it here. But that's why I was like, so I was, you know, but at the same time, I get it. You want a story. So I don't know if my story could be the basis of a story, although I think if you focus on a certain key scenes and then elaborate and embellish, obviously, you might get something. You could put something together that could be pretty exciting, but or at least interesting for 90 minutes or so. But I think there are a lot of different versions where people and stories that I've experienced or have heard, or that others could contribute to, could be told in a way that would you know, broaden the scope, et cetera, and so forth. And then by now you would have had more women, particularly, who would have been involved in these spaces. Because when I came, and I'll come back to this, but when I was moving into sort of the latter part of my third and fourth year, women were just now being allowed to come and serve on warships. They had previously been allowed to serve on other supply and other kinds of ships, but they were starting to come on board our aircraft carrier and all this other stuff. So you might get, you could have more women. You could have, and, even the picture I used for this, I clipped edited a picture. It's a woman, I believe, a Latina who's working on the flight deck, which at the time I was there was brand new and very rare. In fact, one of the stories I should note is that there was we heard a rumor that a woman had to be tackled on the flight deck to prevent her from being sucked up into a jet exhaust. And of course, their primary concern when that happens is it ruins the jet. But the point of the story at the time was this is why women shouldn't be allowed up there, at least as it was reported and relayed to in the version I got. Okay, so I don't know. So I'm just going to go through some of the stuff that I have here that in my notes that I've just been messing with for over the years and see what it is. It's not in any particular order, although I've tried to have some ordering to it, but I will say this. So I served on the USS John F. Kennedy aircraft carrier, CV-67. And I'll come back to this, but the only real visual aid that I have specific to my service is this yearbook from my second cruise. So I'm going to show you. We'll have a little bit of fun with that. It's always fun to see those pictures. But so, okay, so that's that. So now, again, the point of my story, though, and the version that I would like to see with E3 and below is that it's not, and this is why I'm saying it's not made for Hollywood or anything else, because it's not something that would, like Top Gun and these other films, garner support from the military. It's not it wouldn't be a propaganda film for the military. They wouldn't find it as being useful to recruitment. In fact, the counter recruitment work that I did, at least briefly, with the late John Judge would have to be brought up at some point as well. But so it wouldn't have a budget. So we would, as I've thought about it over the years, I'm thinking people with the real artistic capability would have to come up with ways to show certain things without having access to actual aircraft carriers and whatever and whatnot. So, and I'll come back to that throughout, this discussion. But as I mentioned earlier this morning, that initial scene, and even when I've thought, like, there are ways, as I said, you could tell this, it could be a comedy, and I don't mean like a spoof silly comedy, but like an actually well done comedic film. It's funny, but it's actually, doing its work. It's Richard Pryor, George Carlin funny, if I could, say it that way. But there's a way you could do, straight drama. It could be, it could be done as an action film. I mean, obviously there's a number of different ways to do it, but you would have to do it skillfully and artfully without having all the access to, because it's not, in the end, it would not be a pro-Navy story. Not my story. If somebody takes it and bastardizes it, obviously they could do it a different way. So as I said, I'm thinking of, like, if it was like a parody or a spoof or just done to, even dramatically satire or parody or whatever it would be, Top Gun, you would start with those exciting scenes on a flight deck of an aircraft carrier. You would start seeing all the people in the different color shirts doing the different work and all that kind of stuff, and the pilots saluting and the jets flying and all that. But then again, instead of the downward trajectory, instead of the upward trajectory into the cockpits of the jets and into the lives of the officers, you would go the exact opposite and go below decks, where you would see beneath the flight deck, you go down to the hangar bay, and you see a bunch of people doing a lot of different work. You see mostly, again, enlisted people working on aircraft, moving weaponry, moving supplies, whatever. Sometimes, playing. They had, I remember they had a basketball hoop set up there at one point, but even then, I mean, the deck is it's flight deck. So it's like not only hard, it's like it's with the divots in it to be a grip for tires. It was very like any kind of physical contact with the deck would lead some kind of bruise or scar or worse. But you could start, then you could go below that to where you have the mess decks where everybody's eating, where everybody's, and I have, what I did do is before I get to the yearbook, just pull up a couple of these visuals here, get a better idea of what I'm talking about. This is the aircraft carrier I was on, the John F. Kennedy. So, so I'm saying, like, you could start, like, I don't know how you would get an actual shot that the Navy would approve of, but you start with something like, because it is captivating. I think it is, powerful, et cetera, and so forth. But then you go, below decks and you see like, and this is a newer aircraft carrier. Like this is the mess decks of I'm not even sure which one this is, but it's just definitely newer than, we didn't have a Pepsi machine and all that in there and all that. But you could go below here, but you see all the enlisted folks, you see the different colored jerseys. So when they're not up there doing all the fancy stuff on the flight deck, everybody's down here eating. And what I was looking for here, and I don't know if there's a difference because it looks like there's a lot of air crew here, but you see people grouped by, different uniform. You got people in the blue overalls that might be engineers or any, they could be in our weapons division even. But I also noticed, like, I'll come back to this in a second. But when I was there, again, this is from I joined the Navy in 89, in the fall of 89, went to boot camp, and then joined the ship in January of 1990, and was there until the fall of 1993. And what I always remember was that with rare exceptions, the mess decks for me were always like walking into some sort of stereotypical 1950s segregated, black and white movie, TV show kind of, eyes on the prize footage or something, where like there was a lot of racial separation. It wasn't segregated, but there was separation. It seemed that, black people ate together, white people ate together, Latinos ate together, the Filipinos ate together. It was very much like that. Now there were exceptions there were just exceptions. There were, people often ate with who they worked with, but in general, I always felt like that was the case. I don't know if things have changed or whatever. But it's something to work with, and it played a factor in a number of different issues that I had and witnessed, just in terms of, people literally asking, how come you're sitting with them and not over here? Why are you sitting with there and not over there? I mean, it was always kind of weird. Anyway, but you would also see, and this looks like a picture of women sailors, and I'm not sure what ship this is on, but when I was just Googling pictures of aircraft carrier berthing spaces, this is what our racks look like. Stacked three high, 150 people in our berthing quarters in this space. So if you see behind this woman here, this doorway here, in our space, we had on one end of the berthing area a door like this that led up and out and up to the middle deck. So this would have been below the mess deck. So this is like 3 or 4 decks below the flight deck. And then on the other side of this, there was another exit that went through what was like the lounge area, where we had a TV and maybe a couple tables where people played cards, and there were always, some squabbles and arguments and sometimes full on flight fights. over the TV, over the heat. I remember I started a fight with a brother I was cool with up until that point, because I couldn't stop laughing I just thought it was so funny to put my cigarette I smoked cigarettes at the time, and to flick my ashes out on his leg while on his dungarees while we played spades, and I just kept messing with him. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it was just, I mean, I don't know. That was just part of it. It was just always hot. It was always too crowded, a lot of antagonism. I always felt like, and I'll probably come back to this also, like I was losing my humanity, descending into worse forms of my humanity, like not, just not a horrible person, but just not the best person I could be. So I just kept flicking ashes on his leg. And obviously he didn't like that. He told me not to do it. I obviously couldn't help it, did it again, and he swung on me. So we fought. And we were once cool and weren't cool anymore after that. And I get it. I'm not mad at him. He didn't accept my apology. But I put it back anyway to the birthing area. This is where we were living. So I'm 6'2". I could not stretch my legs all the way out. You obviously cannot sit up. And that's where I lived. I was ship's company. So I lived on the ship. And then this bed, like where she's laying here, lifts up, and under there is a little bit of shelving area. Everybody around the corner has a locker, and that's it. Meanwhile, this is a picture of how the captain lives. So I just thought, this is part of the captain's stateroom on board. On our ship, and I'll tell why I was there in a little bit, the story behind that. But on our ship, the captain had his own kitchen staff, a fireplace, a room like this for entertaining guests, a really nice dining area, and then a bedroom area that I actually never saw. So he lives pretty well. He lives out at sea better than most people live at home. I might come back to this as well, but just to give an idea of what you might see down below and how it might be told, this is an officer's stateroom. This is where maybe a junior officer would stay, and the fact that there are 2 bunks, I suggest that it's a junior officer, because senior officers have their own rooms. And this is a room. It was a room like this that I was tasked to clean. And one day decided I just didn't feel like doing anything, and sat down in the chair that was like this here, put my feet up on this little desk, and then he had a TV somewhere like over there, put the TV on, and this keeps changing, put the TV on, and sure enough, he came in, said, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be doing that, right? That's exactly what he said. I said, yes, sir. And that was it. Literally 10 minutes later, I was taken out of here and put in the deep sink doing dishes for 12, 15, 16 hours a day. But honestly, I liked that. I preferred doing dishes in being as dirty and hot and filthy as it was, but I preferred that being tucked away in the background where nobody would see me than having people see me cleaning this man's, quarters and cleaning their bathrooms, and like I just found that to be more demeaning than So again, this is what those racks look like. You see, it opens up, and then where the enlisted people are, and that's this person's stuff looks very neat. Mine never looked that neat. This is the flight deck of the ship I was on, CV-67. This is what it would look like when the flight deck crew would gather in the morning. And I joined this once or twice myself. I would have been wearing a red shirt in the weapons department. And what they do right after this usually is what they call a FOD, walk down, foreign object damage, and all of them. So this would also be another scene you could have in a film. But you might have to mock up an aircraft carrier on a set somewhere. But what they do is everybody would line up shoulder length, or more or less shoulder to shoulder, at one end of the flight deck, and they would slowly walk down the deck, everybody looking for the smallest thing, that might get sucked up into a jet intake and destroy an engine or hurt somebody. So before all the fancy flying and all that stuff, this is what happens. You could tell that part. Something else I'll probably come back to, you could tell this part, like you could get into the politics. For instance, there's interesting politics about cruise departure day and cruise arrival day. When the ship comes in and leaves, you see up at the top here on the flight deck, everybody gathers. I did that once, where you go up in your uniform and you put yourself, array around the edge of the ship, and you can see everybody as you're coming in or leaving, and people come and they got their signs and they're waving and all of this. But like I said, there's a lot of politics and interesting stories that could be told there. For instance, when I came back from Desert Storm, unbeknownst to me, because I had not been in contact with her, I had not seen her since I had left high school. But when I came back from Desert Storm, this white girl that I knew from high school showed up with my mother at the thing, and then drove home with us, and it was terribly uncomfortable. I was like, "What are you doing here?" And my mother was like, "Well, I thought you would want to see a friend of yours when you came back." And I was like, nah. Not at all. And there are other versions of this where that was more comical. There's other times where people the wrong woman showed up, or or nobody showed up. That's not a good feeling. And the flip side, people there who might be in the crowd waving goodbye. We used to jokingly, we used to jokingly. So for instance, everybody had a hat like this for their ship. There would be times where so if that was the John F. Kennedy going out to sea, men who were not going out, men from other ships who stayed in port, might go to the local bar or club and look for women who would come wearing the cap of the ship of their man that their man is on, that just left. And then you show up at the bar, you look for the woman wearing the hat of the ship that just left, and you go and holler at her because she's letting you know, hey, my man is gone for 6-7 months. There were times where I've even done it. I'm in a crowd just like that, as a ship, another ship is leaving, and we're in the crowd waving, like, we got you covered. A lot of, so there's like a lot of little shady stories that you could tell, the politics of going out to sea. Anyway, what else is on here? What else did I have on here? So this was the job I did as a gunner's mate on an aircraft carrier, shooting the M14. And in this case, it was pretty cool. For what they call underway replenishment, you shoot this projectile, and it goes over to the other ship. You're moving like 20, 30 miles an hour. I don't know, whatever it is. I don't know, 15, 20 maybe. I don't know what it is. You're moving pretty quick, knots or whatever. And you shoot this over. And then from there, they connect the cables, and you can start bringing supplies from the supply ship over to the carrier and vice versa. Another part of my job was the 50 cal machine gun. And here it looks like they have a woman gunner's mate. So that would have been, a change in the years since I've left. That could be added to the storyline very easily. And this, I can't front. We didn't do it often, but this is one of the best parts of the job. The 50 cal machine gun, I can't front. It was a lot of fun to shoot. I just can't front. It's dope. It's just dope. Okay, but that's okay. So that was those were just to give some of the visuals. So as I go through some of the scenes that I want to talk about, you'll have at least some of you who don't know, would have some sort of frame of reference for what I see as a possibility. By the way, couple other things here before I get to some of that. I didn't even know this was in here, and I don't remember getting it, but there's a citation from the commanding officer of the USS John F. Kennedy, Gunner's Mate Guns 3rd Class. So I was a petty officer 3rd class. That was the highest rank I ever got. They take pleasure in commending Gunner's Mate Guns 3rd Class Jared Arlen Ball of the United States Navy for service set forth in the following citation. Petty Officer Ball's performance of duty while serving as ship's armory custodian on board the USS John F. Kennedy while deployed in the Adriatic and Mediterranean seas from October 1992 to March 1993 in support of Mediterranean Deployment 193 was commendable. He consistently performed his demanding duties in an exemplary and highly professional manner. This is hilarious. Displaying exceptional leadership and technical skills, his untiring efforts were instrumental in the repairs of numerous magazine sprinkler system components, significantly enhancing the ship's firefighting capabilities and weapons magazines. I did do that work, the ship's sprinkler. So that's another thing, even farther below the mess decks, below the berthing decks, down even down below and in the area where you have like the engineers and the boiler room and all that, whatever is down there, are these weapons magazines where they house all these bombs and ammunition, and they have to have, of course, a sprinkler system that is maintained and always ready to go just in case. And that was one of the weirdest things for me. I'm a little bit claustrophobic, maybe, I don't know, a little bit, but it was always weird to climb down these ladders down, and go from one magazine to the next, because the elevators were only there for the weapons to go up and down. We had to climb up and down and go work on the sprinkler systems, and every once in a while do a sprinkler test, which was just a nightmare of a job. But again, there's ways you could tell stories in showing all of that work being done, because while that's happening, you have different people working in different areas for long hours. They're sometimes fighting, there's sometimes gossiping, there's sometimes slacking off, there's sometimes talking about something that could be turned into a funny scene. I don't know, there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, in one, I had to go and I'll come back to this guy, GMG2. I'm gonna come back to that. I'm gonna save that story because that's I'm gonna come back to that. He was directly responsible for inventory and categorizing of repair parts for 32 magazine sprinkler groups. Additionally, as mount captain for Mount 51, that's right, I forgot I was even a mount captain on that 50 cal machine gun mount. He ensured the full operational capability and reliability of this 50 caliber self-defense system and its crew. Petty Officer Ball's exceptional dedication and professional competence reflect great credit upon himself. USS John F. Kennedy and the United States Naval Service. T.R. Beard, Captain U.S. Navy. I don't think I ever saw that man. I don't know. Anyway, that's interesting. So, but what I will do, though, is I do want to show you very quickly from the yearbook. Look at that guy. Look at that guy right there. Look at that handsome devil right there with his Top Gun. Now, what's funny, no, right here, this one, this guy. This guy. So what's funny about that is that I was on a plaque for Top Gun because I forgot how many you have to do, 15 or 20 successful shooting the projectile over to the other ship to start the underway replenishment. That if you do it, they actually call you Top Gun. So I'm actually Top Gun. So you could actually have a play on that. I'm sure copyright wouldn't be allowed to do it in terms of something that's consumed professionally, but that would be an interesting way to start this story, to brand the story, the real Top Gun, gunner's mate. Anyway, all right. So just some of that. So as I'm saying, you could pan down. You start with that opening scene and pan down, and you could start to look at all of these different things. Another scene that I have, well, I do see that you pan down, and then you can show all of the different work happening on the ship to make it run. Again, the people cooking, the laundry, the cleaning, the lifting, because even before everything gets to the flight deck, the bombs have to be arranged and put up onto what do they call them? Anyway, they have to be, loaded up and sent up the weapons elevators, which we helped with at times, as well as being part of the weapons division. You have, again, you have the people who are actually steering the boat. The captain isn't up there steering the ship, and often it is somebody as, maybe not an E3, but often maybe, but a low ranking enlisted person is doing the boat. You got, again, you could show all of the different, you could show us on our gun mounts around the catwalk. You could show the enlisted folks who do on aircraft carriers. There's the missile systems are run not by gunner's mates, but by fire system techs or something like that. You could show them. I mean, there's endless work being done to make a ship function. It's 6,000 plus people when they go out to sea. And on some level, to me, it is fascinating the way you can get all these different people to sort of work in some kind of concert when there's so much hostility and animosity and stress underneath it. I mean, it's fascinating. You got ship stores. You got people. You got the little kiosks where there's like candy and stuff sold. You got gambling spots. You got spades and dominoes games playing endlessly. You've got music playing. You got people singing. You got, I mean, there's just so many things that could be turned into, so that's how I see, and then you just show the way the ship is functioning beneath the surface. And as I said, could mine be the story or a version of it that is told in E3 and below? Sure. I've got, some of the, my notes tell point in that direction. You could tell a version of someone who is, again, serving a sentence for, you could do the backstory and show somebody getting thrown out of their house, getting caught up in pharmaceutical drugs and arrested, and you could make it more. You could do this with various versions of backstories for people that are going to be highlighted throughout the film. And how did they get there? How did they get there? What made them get there? You got to have the scene at the MEP station in Maryland, the processing station, even before you go to boot camp, where you've already signed up. I mean, all of it could be told, from the arrest to the recruiter coming to the homeless shelter, to the next door neighbor telling me, nah, man, don't go into the Army. You got to join the Navy. You want to get all the women and all the travel and all of this and all of that. You could have that scene in there. Then you could have the scene, where the judge tells me or tells whoever you're going to get unsupervised probation so that you can go to boot camp in another state. But if you get arrested within a year, you're going to serve whatever that plus this. Then I get the recruiter who lies to me. And because I did well on the ASFAB, which is the SAT for the military, and I think in part I did well, not because I was certainly not a good student and maybe above average intelligence or whatever, but no genius. But the reality is because the standard is so low. Now, what I remember is that the division officer that I got, and I'm gonna come back to him in a little bit because he's got to be a part of this as well, or a version of him, obviously. I was told that, if I remember correctly, my ASVAB score was an 89. That's the number I remember. I don't know if it's accurate or not. And I was told that the average was in the 30s. So what I do remember is that my recruiter, the guy who was trying to sign me up, a shady brother too. He was shady. He got all excited when my scores came back. He was like, "Look, you can do whatever you want to do." And he gave me this big, thick book with all these jobs and all the fancy stuff. And I remember I said, well, I saw the air rescue, because I was like, it would be kind of cool to fly around in helicopters and save people. I was thinking I don't have to shoot anybody. I get to be a hero. He was like, you got to do a minimum of 6 years. So I was like, okay, now. Because I was already like, I'm not doing more. I got to do 4. That's it. Got invited to try out for SEALs. They came and said, you know, we saw your score. Come and do this basic physical test, and you could go to SEALs. And I was like, that sounds like too much work, too much of a challenge. 6-year minimum enlistment. Nah, I'm not doing that either. But my point is, my recruiter was like, you could do whatever you want to do. But what he ended up saying was, look, if you can't decide, and he knew there was a time crunch because I had a court date coming up. So he was like, look, I know you got a time crunch. Sign up as an apprentice. And when you get to your ship, you get 6 months to look around, see what you really want to do. And then they'll send you to the school for that after that. That's the version he told me. And I was like, word? I don't have to decide right now. No, I get to duty station. I get 6 months. Yep. You just have to sign. So I went in and that's how I went in as an E2 and as an apprentice, if I remember correctly, with the idea that I was going to have all these options. So I even kind of went to boot camp arrogant a little bit. I was like, because other people were like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I was like, I'm going to get to choose. I don't have to decide yet, you know. But they were like, for now, they're just going to stick you where they need you. And I was like, that's famous last words, by the way. But all of this, I think, is a fascinating story, because then at the MEP station, I'll never forget, this would have to be a scene. And again, you don't need military, you wouldn't need Pentagon support for this scene, because it's just a room that looked like a classroom. And they have us all sitting in there, and in walks this guy, very serious in his uniform. And he says something to the effect, he's very serious. He says, listen, we understand there's people coming in here under fraudulent enlistment. And people are signing up when they know that they have a court date, and there's something, they think that they're going to, that they're going to join before they go to their court date, and that's going to somehow protect them. But if we find out, this is what I remember, he said, if we find out you've done that, we're going to hit you with fraudulent enlistment, and you're going to serve the time of your contract in Leavenworth in Kentucky. He said, if this applies to any of you, stand up and line up against the wall. And up to that point, I'm sitting there next to this brother. I remember I'm sitting there, and I don't know, we just started talking, and he said, I don't know how we got to what our situations were. And I remember him saying, he was like, man, I don't know if I can go to Chicago because I'm on probation. I can't leave Baltimore. So when that guy came in and made that announcement, me and this dude, and then as it turns out, more than half of the room got up and went and stood up against the wall. Dude was like, okay, goes and gets everybody's recruiter. We had to go sit in another room and wait. It was just hours and hours and hours. I see them bringing in my recruiter, and he looks at me like if he could have put his hands on me, he'd probably choke me to death. That's the look he gave me. And I was crying. All right. 17, I hadn't even turned 18 yet. And in a few week period, I thought I was going to prison for real. Then I thought I got out of that, and I'm going to the Navy. Then I'm finding out today that I'm looking at 4 years. I'm thinking I'm looking at 4 years in Leavenworth because my recruiter told me to lie, and I did. then I went before the judge, and the judge said, because of you signed up, we're going to give you the unsupervised probation so you can go to boot camp. That's how it worked. They got me out of it. I didn't get in trouble. I don't know what happened to the recruiter guy, but they didn't punish me for it. We worked it all out. I went to boot camp, and that was that for that part. But again, all, I think, interesting stories that could be, easily turned into something, hot in film or elsewhere. All right. So under my list of scenes, before I got to, there's plenty that we could do with boot camp. There was there's that first night where you're forced around. I mean, there's been some boot camp stuff, like obviously with whatchamacallit, with what's that famous movie? The Vietnam movie, with old boy that's now in Stranger Things. The one, Full Metal Jacket. There's other boot camps, there's the comedically, we saw a version of it in Stripes back in the day, and I'm sure there are others. So I don't know if this part, but would be as new or as some sort of groundbreaking as other parts of what I'm suggesting here. But but there is that first traumatizing, that spigot type shower that everybody has to gather around naked. And I get it. The idea was immediately to break everybody down, make everybody embarrassed, everybody humbled, and they would tell you we're breaking you down to turn you into a sailor. Oh, even before that. Oh man. Oh, I'm even forgetting. I'm all out of order. So anyway, there's me and my white buddy who enlisted together on the buddy program. And the night before we go in, my high school buddy, the night before we go to boot camp, we're on Route 40 in the motel they put us up in, and we're burning everything we could get. We're just smoking everything we can get our hands on. It's just a smoke fest. And the way they set it up is that they arrange so that they pick you up late, you fly out late, and they arrange for you to get to Great Lakes, Illinois, early in the morning. Everybody's disoriented. It's obviously done on purpose. Even then we knew it was done on purpose. And the first thing they say is everybody got to go give a piss test. We were like, oh, go give the piss test. They're screaming at us. They're yelling at us. Don't sit there. Don't stand there. Don't talk there. Don't write like that. Don't, everything is just loud and yelling, and you're tired. You're disoriented. It's a little scary, frankly. It's like, what the hell? It's like all my life choices. I was like, damn, how am I here? That's what I just kept thinking. Like, what is going on? Get you processed in that whole processing thing, getting your underwear and your dungarees and your duffel bag, all of this. I mean, all of this stuff, like, you could just turn it. There's a lot that could be done. And again, you wouldn't need the Pentagon support for a lot of these scenes. Of course, we got caught. We're in boot camp, and the instructor comes and calls me and my buddy's name into the office, and he starts laughing, and he says, so you had to, how did he put it? He said, he was like, you had to just, smoke that last bit of reefer, didn't you? These two old, well, this was an old black man and this young black understudy, who would later go on to have you could see he went on to have a strong career. This dude was the older dude was on his way out. He was in bad shape. You could always smell the liquor and the cigarettes trying to cover the coffee cigarette smell, trying to cover the liquor. He was in bad shape. But he's like, you had to smoke that last bit of reefer, didn't you? And he's holding the paper. And he said, and we were like, oh man, because we thought we were going to get put out. I thought for a second I was going to get put out, and then they were going to, charge me with the initial charge, and then I was going to go to prison. That's what I was thinking in that moment. He said, give me 20. We gave him 20 push-ups. He handed the paper to his partner balled it up, threw it in the trash. We were like, so that's it? He was like, yeah. He's like, for weed, they don't care. He said, if it had come back with coke or PCP, like somebody else came back with coke, he got kicked out. or something else, or heroin or something like that, they'd have kicked you out right then and there. But for weed, they didn't care. So I was like, wow, okay, bet. So anyway, there's a lot that you could do with boot camp. There was, you know, the first official march we took resulted in a fight because this brother from Houston accused a white boy of calling him a nigger, and the two black boot camp instructors were not having it. They were like, I don't care. I want to say this might be my memory being embellished, but but it would work for a movie scene because it was the same sentiment. Because the older drill instructor, I wanted to say they don't call them drill instructors. I don't know where I'm getting that from movies, but I can't remember what they call them in the Navy. But I remember him saying something to the effect, I don't care if he did call you a nigger. You don't break ranks. You don't mess up the lines. You don't mess up the work. The point. So again, everything with the Navy was pay attention to detail. It was not about physical this and tough that. It wasn't like the Marines. It wasn't, you know, it was more about attention to detail. And I get it, because when you get to the ship, it really was, I don't care if nobody likes each other. We don't give a damn. All we care about is that you're not going to mess up the mission. So if the mission is to march in step from the barracks to the mess hall, that's it. So nigger, not nigger, friend, not friend, it doesn't matter. That's all that's going to happen. And then the whole point was, you're all, he was like, you're not special. So, I mean, he got more mad at the black dude for than anything else. It was my first, you know, like, wow. The waiting in line to get your first haircut. They intentionally make you wait. They put a trash can out because they want to see how long. They want to see you break down. They want to see people passing out. They want you to throw up all the cigarettes and the liquor and the drugs you've been doing before you got there, and the bad food, although they feed you garbage. But they want you to they want you to pass out. They want you to break. And I remember, you know, I making it through that, you know, getting my hair cut. Then you get your first phone call, which is after the first couple of days. I called my mother, and I was crying on the phone. I said, let me come home. I said, I was like, this is not, let's do a plan B. And I was literally crying. And she said, this I will never forget. And this I do have verbatim. And the backstory for this is legitimizes, I think, her decision. But what she said on the phone was, and this would even work for a movie too, because you could leave this as a scene for an audience to figure out on their own. They don't need to get the full backstory unless you wanted to give it, but it's not necessary. All you would need, you don't even need to show her on camera. All you need to hear on the other end of the phone is, you can leave, but you cannot come home here. You cannot come here. That's what you can leave there, but you cannot come here. That's the line. Click. And I'm like, damn, that didn't work. Anyway, so you make it through boot camp, go to the duty station. On my way to the ship, there's great opportunity for seeing at because the Kennedy was already out at sea, so they flew me from from home. You get I think a 30-day break at home, where I just remember, I just remember being terrified. I stayed in the house a lot. I did, because I was just like, I just don't. All I kept thinking was, I'm terrified. I don't want to get arrested. I don't want to end up in prison. I need to make this year. And then, you know, just keep my head down. I just remember being a lot of fear. Then they fly me down to Mayport, Florida. And then from there, they flew me down to Guantanamo Bay, to catch up with the ship. So that was my first time going to Cuba, to Guantanamo Bay, and seeing that in real time. So by the time years later, when I saw the film, another Tom Cruise film, you know the one, You Can't Handle the Truth, which took place, a lot of it on that base. A lot of it rang true to me, because that's where I first saw and experienced, and at least as I remember it. And I'm going to ask, there's a couple people that I'm still in touch with. One in particular, I'm going to ask him if he has any memory, but he wasn't there for this. So anyway, I'm happy to hear other people's versions. I met him on the ship later, but anyway. Post 46 was the local bar where all the sailors and Marines showed up. And every night I went there, I was there for a week. I think I went there at least 3-4 nights of the 7 days. There was some kind of fight between the Marines and the Navy. There was some kind of, it was very much like, we are Marines, we're here to save everybody, you all are punk sailors. I mean, it was like all very real. So when I saw that attitude in that film, I was like, damn, that's legit. Like, they really feel like, and I was always like, oh man, you all are doing too much, this is too serious. I wasn't moved by it. I do remember being able to get a case of beer for $7, which I thought was just the best thing in the world at the time. But anyway, then I get to the ship, and this is where, things for me get, I think there's a lot to be said about the experience. The first week I'm on board the Kennedy, this is definitely in my scene list. First week on board, gunner's mate guns, second class, E5, Johnson, redhead white boy from somewhere in Georgia. He's our immediate supervisor. We're I'm in the weapons G2 division. It's me, this brother, dark-skinned brother, Steve Stasher. I say that specifically because it plays a factor in a few minutes. Steve Stasher, Harold Walker from North Carolina, a brother, a real thin boxer brother. Like, he was a fighter, but he had that, I don't know, lightweight, welterweight, whatever it is, that frame, tall, but just real thin, but that kind of fighter. And he was a good boxer. Who else was there? Those two, and there was two, maybe 3 other black men, so Johnson was the only white dude in the room. And he sits there, and he sits there and he says, and I don't know how we got here, but this is where he started. He said, look, I don't like niggers. He said, in fact, we almost killed one for trying to date a white girl in our town or something like that when I was home on my last, what do they call them? I don't even forget what they call it, break or whatever. But if you all just do what you're told, and I'm not gonna abuse my rank, and you won't have any problems. And then he gets up and leaves. And I remember I turned to Stasher, and I was probably trying to act tougher than I was, but even I was like, we're not going to swing on him. Even in my humble little suburb, white boys got swung on for that. But Stasher turned to me, and this is the way I remember it, and this I would want to be a scene in one way or another. He turned to me, he said, looky here, he said something like, you mulatto, light, something like northern. He went like, he had a whole, he said, that's how we like our white boys where I'm from in Tennessee. We like to know where they stand. And ain't no reason to give them any problem. And I was like, wow. Okay. Anyway, Stasher's going to come up in another scene too, by the way. I got another scene with him in it. So that was it. And that was, and that was sort of, again, a light shined on how things worked. There was the military obviously is not a space for rebellion, and it doesn't encourage, hey, we have a protest, but it really does work best for people who are just give me give me the rules, give me my job, give me my check, and I don't want any problems. And I was shocked because Stasher, to me, another like big dude, strong dude, violent dude, as I would find out later, like, you know, willing to get busy, like not, you know, but just, you know, not interested in that. And nobody was interested in challenging that. It was surreal. I'll never forget that. First week on board, January of 1990, leaving. Yeah, because I went from Guantanamo to Jacksonville, I think. Anyway, they flew me all over the place to catch up to the boat. And finally, you know, when I got there, it was January of 1990, and that's what was going on. A couple of other things about deployment. When you go out to sea, what, you know, there's a lot that could be done artistically with the stress that's involved with being away so long. You know, one of the scenes I have is that when we were told we were going to Desert Storm, the announcement we got was, so this would have been in August of 1990. You got 3 days to pack up 2 to 3 months worth of stuff, get your stuff in order. We're going to be gone. Well, how long? 2 to 3 months. We don't know. What are we doing? We're going over to save the Kuwaitis from Iraq. And I remember I was like, in my head, you can't continue to be this stupid and ignorant and powerless in your life. I remember vividly standing on the pier. This would be a hard shot to recreate without the Pentagon support, but I know talented filmmakers could do it. I'm standing on the pier, and they told us at the time it was the largest mobilization of the fleet since Vietnam, the fastest and the largest. And there's all these helicopters flying stuff onto the ship. It's docked in Norfolk. There's all these people coming back and forth. I mean, there's massive traffic happening. And I'm just standing in the middle. I remember I was standing there looking up at all of this happening in awe and saying, I can't continue to be this stupid and ignorant and powerless. This dude, George Bush, declared war or whatever. And now my whole life is upside down. You got people. One of my favorite things. One of my buddies went off and had a quick wedding, and I was like, "Why?" And I came to find out a number of people went off and married girlfriends or even just friends because during a deployment, particularly when war is declared, or not war because they obviously didn't declare war, but some sort of hostility is engaged in, you get hazard duty pay. Your spouse gets money. Your paycheck doubles, I think, at least. Your spouse and children get health care. Your everything, just all the resources start to come in. Then I noticed that there was the stress on the other side, where men who were married and not doing the right thing or being accused of not doing the right thing, wives had a very direct line to the ship and to the ship's hierarchy. And if you weren't paying your debt, if you weren't giving them their money, if you weren't taking care of things at home, the Navy would take your check, give the bulk of it to the home, to your wife, and then give you a little allowance, and that would be that. But I just remember, again, I'm saying, how could I can't, I have to start learning. I don't know where Kuwait is. I've never heard of this place before. I think Iraq is something around where the Bible took place. I was like, I didn't know anything about anything. And then all of a sudden, a few days later, we're saying goodbye. We're out at sea. And for 7.5 months, from August of 1990 to the end of March of 1991, right? September, October, November, December, January, February, March. Yeah. 7.5 months out, we were gone, with 7 months, 5 days in the water. I know I have never recovered from that. Never. That alone was traumatic. 7 months of floating, of at least 2 to 3 or 4 months of that, probably maybe even more than that, because I don't think we knew we were going home. I only think we had a couple weeks notice. So for a bulk of that, all you had was rumors as to when this was going to end. You couldn't even put a date up on a calendar and just focus on that. It was just 2 months went by. When are we going home? I don't know. 3 months go by. When are we going home? I don't know. 4 months go by. I don't know. And you're in the water. We had both of them. In 4 years, you generally get 2 cruises. At least it was when I went. You get 2 6-month cruises, but they're supposed to be broken up with. And what I always heard was all the story, the fantasies. You're stopping in Barcelona, you're stopping in Israel, you're stopping here, you're stopping there. We didn't get to go to any of that. I didn't go any of those places. You get to go this, do that. It's like a week in the water, then you're in a port. A few days in the water, you're in a port. For 6 months, you're going all over the world. And then, if you're lucky, from what I heard, if you're a black man and you get to go to Australia, where we were rumored, there was a rumor we were going to go there once. The rumors, and I'll be happy to hear the story. The rumors, the stories I always heard from black men who went were just the fantasy of fantasies, at least for some, in terms of white women in particular. The white women waiting at the pier to take home black men. So there was always this, oh, maybe we'll get to go to Australia. But it's stressful out at sea. There's family stuff. There's a stress over like I was out there as a single, unimpacted, no children, no spouse, no girlfriend, nothing. And at first I thought, man, that's going to suck, because you want letters and whatnot. There was no email. There was none of that at the time. But over time, I came to think maybe I was lucky, because it seemed like more people, the stress on relationships was tremendous. There was, of course, the infamous story of the woman sending a VHS tape to her husband, showing her having sex with some other man. And from what I understand, they sent that dude home immediately. You can't have people like that. Was a way to get him. Maybe that was a setup to get him home, because you can't have people out there traumatized like that. You get out of there. There's what do I have here? Infidelity, family stuff. And then when you're out at sea, there's the racism. They showed the film Mississippi burning on our ships, and at the time you have a ship's TV and what they play, that's all you got. So they would put this movie on, and tension broke out, fights broke out. There was all this, it was just not a good idea. On our way to Turkey, when we went to Turkey, in the days running up to our going to port, for those who will remember, of a certain age might remember this movie, they played the film Midnight Express on ship's TV in a loop 24 hours a day for like, I don't know, a week or several days, because the movie is about a white senator's son who goes to Turkey, tries to smuggle hash back home in the 70s, I think. And a true story, based on a true story. He gets locked up, put in a Turkish prison, and barely survives to make it home. He has to break out, sneak out of prison after going through a horrific, traumatic, it was just a nightmare. So by the time we got there, it worked on me. I was traumatized, terrified. And they told us, this is something else that they don't put in these films. They told us, when you go to Turkey, you're representing the Navy. And the relationship that the Navy has with the port of Turkey is more important than any individual sailor. So if you go here and get in trouble and get messed up with the authorities, caught up with the authorities there, the Navy's not going to help you. In fact, they will leave you there. And in fact, as I remember, 3 men from our ship were left in Turkish prisons when we departed, however many days later. Now, in the interim, there's a lot of stories that could be told about that. When an aircraft carrier pulls into ports overseas, most of them are not big enough to accommodate this 80,000-ton ship that's taller than the Empire State Building, with 6,000 drunk, horny men piling off into your town. So you have to take these Liberty boats. Our sister ship, the USS Saratoga, lost 30 men in a Liberty boat that capsized and they all drowned. And we took those same boats back and forth on choppy water. You're drunk, often coming back. I mean, I could easily see how it would happen. As drunk as I was coming back on those boats, if it had flipped over, even sober, it would be difficult, particularly at night. But if it capsizes because you got 30 to 40 drunk, horny, angry, aggressive, fully, young men up, you're not, I can understand. So it's a terrible loss. And of course, they're not counted as, I don't think they're counted as, the death toll is part of the war. They're just casualties that are, we would have to tell the truth about the compound, as it was called in Izmir, Turkey, where you just tell the cab driver. Of course, the older sailors told us all about this. Just say to the cab driver, you want to go to the compound. They know exactly what you're talking about. It's an open air brothel. It's a gated off, like a community of row houses. And in those row houses are women, as we would find out later, we were told they were often there paying off the debt of men in their families who were in prison, which, was, and there was, a lot of exchange that took place there. Some of it funny, some of it obviously looking back now as an older man, disturbing, but and wildly exploitative and disrespectful. And I mean, and gross, really. Like, looking back, I'm not proud. But I do remember going into one of the rooms, and the young woman looked at me, and she said, "Hold on a second," and went in the back room, and I heard, she pushed play on a little radio, and Eric B's "Follow the Leader" started playing. And I remember I was like, "Oh man, you're like the coolest chick in the world." I was like, "That's the coolest thing in the world." And then, to set the ambiance or whatever. But I mean, yeah. So, there's that. There's a lot of running around. Anyway, there's a lot of stories that could be told there. And what I would come to find out later, there were, again, I would hear about men being locked up and left there. And then from what I would hear, at least rumored, I didn't experience this myself. I was never with these cool level of criminality. There were people who did procure drugs that would be taken back. Because in fact, in Egypt, when we went to Egypt during Desert Storm, we went through the Suez Canal, I think a record 8 times at the time. Somebody in my affiliated crew, I don't even know who exactly did it, brought back some hash from Egypt. And I do recount, I think this would be a great scene in the movie. If you haven't been out in the ocean at night when the stars are not fully lit, you may not know what darkness really looks like. Like, a lot of us who live around cities or whatever have not really seen the dark of night. But when you are out in particularly when you're in a combat situation and the ship's lights are not all lit up, and you're and anyway, and we went out on the one of the back catwalks and smoked this hash on a gun mount in the middle of the night, where we couldn't even see each other until somebody flicked the lighter, which was probably pretty stupid in terms of security or not getting caught. And then it's also surreal to be stoned in the ship's armory, which is a very small space, much, even smaller than the room I'm in, filled with all this weaponry, and no windows and no air conditioning, and only one other person who's allowed to be in there, because only 2 people can be in there. It's very strange to be in that situation, but it's one of my favorite stories to tell. Smoking hash on the back of an aircraft carrier in the middle of the Red Sea is a pretty cool story to me. Now, you could find, there are other stories. There are people, like a guy I knew flew from Izmir to Istanbul because he had met a woman in Izmir, Turkey, and fell in love with her. And they had like a week's long romance, and like he did something that was really not allowed and very risky, actually getting on a plane and flying to another part of the country we're in. That's definitely not allowed. you know, so you could, so like beyond my stories, there's like all these other kinds of stories that could be told from the perspective of the enlisted. So for instance, one of them would be, you know, another one you could tell that could be included is that we found out later that while we're out there at sea, officers are constantly flying off the aircraft carrier and meeting wives and girlfriends in ports all over the world while we're stuck out in the middle of the ocean suffering, getting maybe a few days. No, because we only got a total of 20 days in port. We went to Izmir. We went to Alexandria, Egypt. We went to Marseille in France. And that might be it. We did go, no, we went to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. For 7 months, we were in the water. And I'm telling you, and they call it, and so you get 2 6-month cruises. They call it when you're in the water, that if you do 45 days in water and there's no land in sight for within the next 6 days, I think it was, then you get 2 beers. So we had both of my cruises were 6-pack cruises because we did 3 times of 45+ day consecutive in the water. And then it's only broken up by a day or 2 in a port somewhere. That's it. And then you get 2 beers. Now, if you've been without liquor for several months and you get 2 beers, that's pretty good. Now, if you make deals with people and walk away with theirs and get 6, 7, or 8, you can get plenty nice. And it's pretty sweet, although you still realize you're on a ship with mostly just men in a very hot, congested, you know, so it doesn't always go well. But we you know, that's an interesting, you know, you're walking around a warship drunk, walking around a flight deck in the middle of the ocean drunk is wild and a little weird and very dangerous. Speaking of which, I don't know if this led to it, but one of the scenes that has to be told is when the 2 white boys in the middle of the night jumped overboard in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean in the hopes of getting sent home. You talk about the stress of enlisted life and being in the middle of the ocean and not knowing when you're going home and not being told anything. These 2 white boys jumped overboard. And they were in our berthing area. They lived with us. So I saw them when they got brought back in and found out that, oh, yeah, we're going to send you home. You're going to get kicked out after you get flown back to Virginia and spend the rest of your enlistment in jail. Then you're going to get dishonorably discharged, which is the worst discharge you could get, keeping you from, as they used to tell us then, even getting a job at McDonald's. You are unemployable. You are worse than a felon. You are beneath humanity if you get that discharge. But that's what happened, because from the Navy's perspective, you're not a stressed PTSD, struggling, blah, 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 needing help. You're somebody that made an aircraft carrier and all of the fleet that goes with it. Because you got to understand how fleets work. An aircraft carrier is the center of a fleet and is the most important part of the fleet and is protected by submarines, destroyers, aircraft, other fast frigates, all of whom have the literal instruction to make sure the aircraft carrier doesn't get hit, even if you got to take the hit for them. And when the aircraft carrier has to turn, because when you go overboard, they got to turn everything around, launch the rescue helicopter, make sure you didn't get sucked up under the propeller and chopped into little pieces, find you, pull you out the water, and then reset 20, 15, 8, 10 different ships to get back on track, all for your punk ass. And they're like, I don't give a damn about you. So we had to do all that. Go ahead and get yourself cleaned up, get dried up, showered up, get your stuff, get yourself ready. You're going to get a nice flight home and a nice prison cell until you get a dishonorable discharge. Have a nice day. Peace be unto you. as I told the story this morning, when you go from E3 to E4, you get the chevron on, and there's it used to be what they call the tacking of it on, where everybody who's E4 and above before you gets to come and give you one nice shot on the arm. And my entire, arm was black and blue. And because I was not small and, nobody took it easy, I got put up against the at one point an elevator shaft door, so there was no give, and just and then they come one after the other and they catch you in the hallway. And if you hide, if you run, then they really get you. And then they even did, I don't know if they were doing this so much because I don't think I experienced this, but they give you the, what did they even call it? I forgot what they called it, but it was where they hold you down, pull up your shirt, put water on your stomach, and everybody starts slapping your stomach until it turns bright red or something like that. I forgot, something for rookies or something like that. I don't remember that happening to me. I think I'd remember that, but I did see somebody get it. But anyway, I think they were kind of stopping all of that by the time. And then there's all kinds of stuff that there's another scene where ColinPowell comes on my ship, and he was sort of, again, he was a superstar because he was this black general, and everybody was impressed. And I'll never forget the day I'm there. I'm on the hangar bay, and I was cleaning something. So maybe I was working with a hose, or I was scrubbing. I don't know what I was doing. Maybe I might have been painting something or scrubbing something or some kind of menial labor. And I'm working with this dude, a black guy, and we see ColinPowell, and the brother says, "Oh man, and it's so dope. Look, he's got a white lieutenant carrying his briefcase. That is so." And even then, I had no, fully developed radical consciousness, but even then I was like, but we're still right here. Like, I was like, his blackness and his rank does not help us from having to do this right here. So I was just always like, okay, he's got a white boy, a lieutenant carrying his briefcase, but that I think is another pretty good scene. Another one for me is as I've shared before, you got to take the trash out, and if you have a hand free and an officer walks by, you got to salute. And I remember trying to manipulate the bag, either the two bags or the one bag I had, so that my right hand, or that it looked like both hands were free or were occupied. And this short little punk ass, I'll never forget that little punk. And it was just like the little white kid that you just knew nobody liked him, and that even his officers didn't like him, and he was probably mad because he couldn't do whatever and he just had this look, and we made eye contact, and he saw I was not saluting him. So he said, "Sailor." And I said, "Yes, sir." And he just looked at me, and I put the bag down, picked it up, walked on down the pier with it to throw it away. I was like, "You little mother." And that's all he wanted. He was like, "You gonna give it to me? You'll give me that salute. I see you with trash, but you got a hand. You can wiggle that hand free." Anyway, that same GMG2 Johnson that talked about, I also killed a nigger for dating a white girl. There was a time where we were talking, we used to have to support the weapons. I think they were G4 division who did the weapons elevators, maintain the weapons elevators that would take the bombs up to the flight deck. And one of them flooded one day, meaning all of the hydraulic fluid in the that I don't know, worked the mechanism of the shaft, flooded the bottom of the shaft. And I and whoever else was with me had to go in there and literally scoop it out with boots on up to our, above our knees, scooping this stuff out. And Johnson was standing up at the top of the shaft with his spit cup, chewing his tobacco, laughing. I don't even remember him saying anything. He was just laughing. And I remember at that point, I was like, that was when this was still early on in my time. And I was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. Who stays here? Like, who stays in this nonsense? Who tolerates this? So that's just another scene that the hazing of making us watch Farmyard Follies when we first got on board. That kind of nasty, gross, traumatizing hazing that I did suffer. I do remember that. That's just gross. But it gives you sort of the mentality of the space. And there's something in this movie would depict the devolving humanity that the character or a character would feel, that I felt. I remember vividly feeling like, I got to get out of here. I'm losing whatever humanity I have. I can't be a good human being and stay here. I don't like, I was even like, where do you find love in all this? Like, I just felt all this hostility. I know not everybody has the same experience, and not all facets of even this movie story would have to be all in this way. But it's just all this hostility. There was just constant verbal abuse, constant, racist stuff scribbled on the wall. Klan. There was people who passed around a flyer of recruiting for the Klan at one point. I remember when CNN International came on board the ship, and Dan Rather came on board, and I got picked to be one of the spokespeople for our division. And they put the camera in front of me, and they said, and the question of the day was Bill Clinton's "Don't Ask, Don't Tell," and they said, so how do you feel about gays serving with you? And I said, and I remember my response was, I don't know, but the biggest problem here is the racism. And they immediately cut. But that clip did make CNN International. So no, they didn't immediately cut. They I think there was even I said a little bit more, but when it aired on CNN International, that's all they played. They were just like, they did play that part of me saying, no, the racism is worse. So that was my first media hit. And that's another thing that could be talked about. So there was a question that somebody had actually sent before I did this, asking about, was there a prostitution ring or something to that effect on board our ship? And I never heard of anything like that. But what I did hear about years after I left the Navy, my mother read a story where she said, and apparently was talking about Desert Storm, where apparently a group of gay men on board had formed because we were on the John F. Kennedy, had formed a group known as the Jackie O's. And my mother read about this and asked me about it, and I had to say I never heard about it. So not even in like a demeaning or negative way, and there was plenty of demeaning, negative talk about homosexuals for sure, but which is, I'm sure, why it maybe was kept more secretive. But that could be another interesting part of the reality of the situation. The two observably gay men that I know that worked in our division, one white, one black, never fully admitted they were gay. Everybody knew they were gay. They were not welcomed, though they were not in any overt or certainly violent way demeaned or attacked either, but they certainly were ostracized socially, and not, part of the cliques and social circles. So that, I'm sure, could be part of a story in there as well. Then there's also the stuff that happens. Oh man, one of the scenes. Okay, so one of the scenes that I have here is described as oh man, it's already I'm already, dang, I can keep going. There's so much to tell. It's already 90 minutes. All right, so let me start to wrap up here. But there's a couple things that would have to be told in here. This one to me is funny. It was traumatizing at the moment, but it's definitely funny now. So the way I have it listed here is sort of like a scene title is dang, where did I write it? I want to make sure I wrote it pretty funny. Oh, guess which Jew is coming to dinner? That's what I wrote. Obviously, a play on guess who's coming to dinner, guess Jews coming to dinner. So when I first got to the ship, I'm there for a couple weeks maybe, and I get contacted by the ship's chaplain. And the ship's chaplain is a Christian preacher, but they have to make room for the practice of other religions and for other religions to be practiced. So he comes to me. I get called to his office, and I'm like, that was weird. And he tells me, your mother contacted the ship and is worried that you, being likely the only Jew on board, you won't, feel welcomed or whatever. And we're out at sea, by the way. We're out at sea. So I'm like, I'm totally embarrassed and traumatized, and like, and be, and when word gets back to the division, the jokes are endless, because what ends up happening is, as a result, the captain of the ship, the captain of a USS John F. Kennedy aircraft carrier, says that they're going to have a Passover Seder. So this must have been around March, around Easter and Passover. So they're going to have I think it was an Easter dinner, but they're going to have like a Passover part of the, like a shout out to Passover. And I'm invited. So the reason I said earlier that I was going to bring back up the captain's stateroom is because I got to go to the captain's stateroom, and it was totally traumatizing. It was horrible. I immediately wrote home and I was like, you cannot do this. I was endlessly made joked. The jokes were, I mean, you can imagine, like, this would be a great part to have. And like, the jokes were endless. Then I go up to this dinner and I see how this guy's living. The fireplace, the wine cellar, the TV, the private kitchen, the bedroom I never even saw, this big dining area. And the people serving the meal were Black men who were E5s, second-class petty officers, who outranked me. And I remember, I'll never forget the look on his face. He obviously never said a word. The brother comes over and he looks at me as he's pouring the water in my cup. And you all know the look. It just said everything. Like, fill in the blank. And I was just wanting to disappear. This is crazy. People were like, and at the time I was a little bit darker. I had my hair. People at the time were like, you're not, they were like, how did you even hustle this? Your mother's a Jew. She contacted the ship. They invited you to the dinner. Everybody was like, was tight and jealous and frustrated and full of jokes. White, Black, everybody, the Latinos, the Asians, everybody, and the Asians, by the way, which I largely Filipino, South Pacific Islanders, which I found, which is another thing that could be told too. Why is it that you have such a degree of Filipinos? What is the history of the Filipinos and their relationship to the United States and the military, that so many end up in the military and in the Navy in particular? Why are so many of these different groups there in the first place? So anyway, that's a scene. That's another scene. Steve Stasher, I got a scene in here. Stasher's last night, when Stasher, he was senior to me, and on his way out, this dude who I considered to be like the coolest, the godfather of the coup, I called him at one point. Not everybody agreed with me, but at the time, I remember telling somebody, but you didn't say nothing to him when he was here. He was hustling me, but I didn't care at the time. I knew, it was his last night. He was getting out of the Navy. We were about to go on another deployment. He was not going to be going. So he knew he was never going to see me and everybody else again. And he was looking to have one last hurrah, and he didn't want to pay for it. So he went through and contacted everybody who he could get off the ship and hang out. And when he contacted me, I was like, hell yeah, I never been invited. Well, early on, I got invited by Stasher and his crew to hang out. They quickly assessed me as not being cool enough, and definitely not willing to be, in terms of some of them, engaged in some of the activity criminally off the ship that they were engaged in. I was not a thug. They assessed that quickly and were like, you just go over there. But this night he was like, you got to come hang out. I don't think I've ever been this drunk before. I don't think I've ever been, you know, I remember one, you know, he comes out of a bathroom in this, I don't even know where we were, some little dive bar, and these two white boys are angrily coming out the bathroom behind him, and he takes a shot. He's like, we got to get out of here. And I'm like, and I'm drunk and stupid and young, and was like, why we got to leave? He was like, because he said they're accusing me of pissing all over their feet in the bathroom. But the way he said it was, I pissed all over their feet in the bathroom, so we should leave. Like, we can't be fighting all of them in here. And I was ready to do it, which was stupid because I could barely walk myself out. I could barely get to the car, which he was driving, which I don't know how anyway. So that's a while, you know, but you know, he drank up all my money, drank up all his money. And I remember pouring myself back across the ship. And this is another interesting thing too. And another reason why I think so many people were able to do certain things in terms of the distribution of drugs and other things is that, the security coming on board the ship, especially if people knew you and recognized you, was not the strongest. It was just a matter of, could you salute the watch and say permission to come aboard? So like, I remember rehearsing that as I stumbled down the pier to permit the and if you could just get close enough, they let you come on. And they weren't really checking stuff. And so anyway, I remember that. And he, you know, if you can get access to the equipment and get shots of the ocean, there's a lot of great scenery out there. If you're not focused on the flight ops and the weaponry, and there were some wonderful moments, honestly, where there are like places you could get on the ship, catch a nice breeze, look out on the ocean, see every star, see the waves, see dolphins, see, you know, some would see whales. I don't think I did, but I don't remember them, but see dolphins swimming as fast as one of the fastest ships in the water. I mean, to see that part is also remarkable, what the planet looks like when it's not interrupted by so much of the unnecessary and unhuman or anti-life humanity, I should say. You could also juxtapose that by taking a shot of the ship from the aft or the back of the ship and look particularly on trash day, and you see all the enlisted people coming and dumping all the trash off the back of the ship, and you see miles long of trash in the ocean. That's a nice little juxtaposition to the scenery I was just describing that could be included. A scene for me would have to be the brother from the first class petty officer, black dude from Alabama, that we were doing some menial work one day. He was supervising me, just sitting there watching me do the work, and I was talking about I'm on my way out. I'm you know, he was in fact, the question was, how come you're still in E4? Why aren't you moving up? And I was like, because I'm getting out. And he was like, what you want to get out for? And it was one of those stereotypical scenes. What you want to get out for? I get fed, travel the world. I got health insurance. I remember he said, I got an Alpine stereo in my car. And I remember telling him, I said, I would rather be homeless in the street again than stay another day in the Navy. So this is the part I don't know how exactly would get conveyed in a 90-minute movie, because I can't even do it within 90 minutes in a live stream. But how do you fully convey that dehumanizing feeling, the constant, again, hostility, the overcrowded conditions, I mean, there are good moments, obviously, but again, it's akin on a lower level to a prison setting. It's like, so yeah, you have moments where you have good spades games. You might win the money in some poker. I lost, I think, $150 in like 5 minutes in craps one night and never played again. You know, you know, at the time you could smoke cigarettes in most spaces. So like the tight spaces with the cigarette smoke and everything was, you know, derogatory references to how many women you could get. I don't know. I mean, and again, it wasn't overly violent. I think I only had, you know, 2 real fights. but that's just me. I mean, there were many others and many more. There was, and the white dude that I ended up fighting with, we put gloves on so we didn't get in trouble, but I fought him for real, and he had to go to the infirmary and then later joined the SEALs. And then I'm told got killed, which I did, but there would have to be a shout out if I'm involved to a couple of people specifically, and I want to shout them out now. Because I also think their stories are pretty interesting. My main, my Jegna, the brother who now goes by Malik Abdul Assad. I knew him as Mac, who, brought me into some levels of Black consciousness, who was there, because my father died. I got, that scene has to be in there. Drinking at our Mexican supervisor's house, me, my 2 Black friends, 2 white dudes who were there that I would never have really considered friends, but we were all in the group together, and we're there, and the white boy decides that's the night he wants to pop off with how Black people and Mexicans are inferior. And my mother had called, somehow she found me she got word that the duty I don't know how they found out where I was, called the house where I'm drunk, get the call, your father's dead, break down, get myself together because nothing could be done that night. Go back to the table, playing cards, drinking. White boy says something that's across the table in the kitchen. I got out, and then he just looked stunned, and I caught him again. And I was like, and my goal, I remember vividly, I want to get him outside. Smacking him will make him fight because you smacked. And I was reaching for him. I'm going to pull him outside. And that's the only time in my life that I felt murderous. To be perfectly honest, the only time in my life where I felt like it's about to happen. I'm going to experience killing somebody tonight. I've been in a few fights. I've been enraged, but that was really the only time I felt like he's gonna die tonight and nobody's gonna stop me. But they did. Everybody grabbed me. I got thrown out of the house. They protected him, which is really protecting me because I'd hate to think I'd still be locked up today for this. Drove me back, and I got sent, to sent home. So Mac, shout out to Malik. Stories related to him. I mean, like people associated with him, some really good people, but also caught up in crack cocaine. And I joined the sister one night for that. And with another friend who would have to get a shout out, my man Mike O'Connell, white Irish boy, little Irish boy from South Boston. And for a year or so, maybe less, we were pretty tight. And in fact, he told me, in fact, I couldn't bring you home because they would kill you, and then try to kill me for bringing you home. Where I first was introduced to the thing in Boston. But a funny scene to think about is being in the hood of Norfolk, Virginia, and me, this white boy, and the sister I'm talking about, and her friend Mike is sitting. Cut to Mike is sitting on the hood of a car in the middle of the hood of Norfolk, Virginia, playing a guitar, and we're all smoking crack or cocaine. Crack. I think it was crack. Could have been cocaine. Smoking it though out there. It's an interesting scene. Anyway, that's it. But shout out to Mike as well. I haven't heard, I've never heard from him. Malik and I stay in some touch. I haven't heard from Mike since he left. And that's another interesting story. If you turn on the film, there's a film starring Kiefer Sutherland and the other actor, that famous actor from the drunk guy from Hoosiers, who was in the motorcycle movie back in the day too. And they're FBI. And Kiefer Sutherland is an FBI agent in this film. What was the name of this film? In the 80s. Anyway, he's an FBI agent trying to take this guy who's a radical, it's a comedy. He's supposed to be taking him back. And there's a scene where they go to a pool hall. And in that scene, there's a white boy with a mohawk cut playing pool. As it turns out, this white boy would be in the Navy and be partnered up with a friend of this guy, Mike, that I knew. And one night we're at this guy's house and he puts in the videotape and he says, you recognize, and he was like, Dan, that's you. And he's like, yeah, that's me. It's a bit part. He's just in the background and the extra in the film. Well, more interesting to me is that it would later turn out this guy was an undercover agent working for Navy intelligence. And part of his job was to find people engaged in illegal activity who were in the enlisted ranks in the Navy. And as it turned out, this friend how did we end up doing this? And was I involved in this? Damn, I'm gonna have to think about this. One thing I was involved with was I had come back home and gone to Baltimore and got an ounce of cocaine and was going to come back to Navy to Norfolk and sell it with this guy Mike and his buddy Wes. I think his name was Wes or something like that. Who was buddies with this guy who had this bit part in the movie, and we were gonna sell this cocaine. So first thing that I learned about myself, well, actually I knew this before. I'm not a good criminal. So he and I ended up snorting the whole thing, which ended up probably saving me. It wasn't that much. It was only an ounce, I think. So we were just gonna cut it up, put it into grams, sell it, and I think that was it. So it wasn't going to be some major. Maybe it's a little more than that, but it wasn't some anyway. But we ended up snorting the whole thing anyway. But as it turns out, apparently, I think Mike and this other guy had gotten into some other arrangement with something else they had gotten into. I don't really know I don't know if I ever knew the full story. Didn't want to know because they got caught on the phone in the apartment that I was at all the time with them doing all of this. The dude who was in this movie turned out to be this undercover agent, caught Mike and this other dude on tape on the phone. They had tapped the apartment's phone, caught them saying stuff on the phone. I apparently never said anything, never got caught up in any of this. They got discharged. I never saw any of them again. Anyway, so I forgot about that one. That was actually pretty wild. Shout out to Mike though. We were at least tight for a minute there, and had some very interesting, And the last person I have to shout out is the brother Paul Fleming. May he rest in peace. This dude, Memphis, Tennessee, really good brother from one of the hoods in Memphis, Tennessee. We were running buddies tighter than ever for a couple of years. And I would have to, anyway, so I just wanted to shout him out. He would have to get some sort of acknowledgement in anything like this, because he was my running buddy, probably tighter than anybody for the longest period of time. And, still not sure exactly what happened. He stayed in the Navy. I think he made a career out of it. And then a couple of years ago, I had a heart attack, and may he rest in peace. So yeah. Anyway, there's other interesting things. When we were detached. When we were out at Desert Storm, and we had an attachment of the SEALs working in our division because we were the ship's armory, so we had to interact with them and spend some time in close quarters with them, not doing anything like they were doing, of course, but there was one night we're watching TV and the SEAL is sitting behind me, and again, it's hot, I'm cranky. At the time I thought I was young and strong and whatever. Dude says something about what's on TV, and I stood up and was like, "What you blah blah blah," barked at him. And I just remember he kind of was leaning back and just looked at me and smiled, and I just kind of sat down and was kind of grateful that was all it was going to be. But they were interesting, to watch them move around, to see how they interacted with other people. And I always thought it was cool that even the enlisted members of the SEALs never had to salute anybody. They didn't have to wear uniforms properly. They could always do what they wanted to do. And I always thought that was pretty cool. What else? I think I've pretty much covered. The sand nigger story would have to be one, where during Desert Storm, we're writing messages on bombs that are going to be loaded up onto the flight deck. And one of the white boys writes "sand nigger," die you sand niggers. And several of us all kind of stopped for a second And this is, I'm still early on the board, and nobody says anything. And he's like, what? I said sand. Oh, the night Michael Jordan went off on his 3-pointers against Portland in the finals. White kid, we're in Port Norfolk. White kid jumps off the flight deck. That's at least 90 feet, kills himself on the pier. Run out, see them as they're covering the body. I remember the boot. A boot was way down. They're covering the body, and we were like, and I went back in. We were like, anybody know who was on? Anybody you know anything about that? Everybody was like, nah, nobody I know was working up there tonight. Went back in and watched the game, and that was it. Never really even found out what happened. My buddy Bill, who went in with me on the buddy program that I mentioned earlier, ended up himself serving on a ship not too far down the line from me in Norfolk, stationed there in Norfolk. Gets kicked out one day because he took LSD, punched the officer of the watch, and got thrown in the brig. Another little interesting tidbit. And his father was a captain in the Navy, a retired captain. So I'm sure that didn't go over well at home. So just a couple other things like that need to be, I think, understood and somehow brought into, like how loud it is below decks. Even when they're not doing flight ops. When they're doing flight ops, you can hear the planes, you can hear them landing, the crunch of the landing, you can hear that screech, that oh man, the screech of when they're retracting the cables that catch the planes. Everything is loud. The TV's loud, the music's loud, people are talking loud. I did lose hearing when I came back just from being in these loud environments all the time. We had the Bob Marley Malcolm X t-shirt scandal where my first bit of activism was involved in trying to challenge and communicate to the Black Master Chief, which is the highest ranking enlisted person on board, to appeal to him that, how is it that white boys can walk off the ship with the rebel flag on their jacket and we can't walk off the ship with a Malcolm X shirt or a Bob Marley shirt on? So I think we ended up winning that, and that was changed, but that was a controversy for a time as well. When the tailhook scandal happened, and they gave us our training on board, with these officers out here abusing women and apparently some men, having their good old time. We in the enlisted ranks had to sit down and watch, sympathy or sensitivity training films on how to, not be abusive to women in a room full of men who don't work with any women, who were never encouraged, even in that moment, to care about women. It was a completely fraudulent, but another scene that could give some insight into the experience, and that I think tells a little bit more about what I would be wanting to be told in this story. This inducement to the lower levels of humanity, because the ultimate goal for the enlisted person is kind of like a civilian in the regular civilian in society. Out here, we're meant to just be customers and consumers, to not think much about anything other than the people we're told to vote for and the products we're supposed to buy. In the military, the enlisted rank, until you get to the level of chief and senior and master chief, for the most part, the enlisted person, you're told not to think. Thinking is your enemy. And not in the cool way, like in Top Gun, the movie, where they're like, don't think, just do it because you've been trained to be a fighter pilot. No, in here it's think, don't do just, or do only what you're told and don't think about it, because you're not relevant. You're not mission critical beyond being, as we saw in COVID, the kind of, what is it? Now I can't even think anymore. The people who we can't do without, right? What is the phrase right now that, where you have to go to work and you have to get sick and you have to, be underpaid and have no health care and all that. That's the way it really was. Now they would try to come up with, just as we see in the civilian world, a sort of a branding and a marketing to propagandize people, to say, so we were told, without you, the weapons can't function, and the people in the boiler room, without you, the ship can't function. And, you know, they would have every once in a while, they would have a little ceremony. They give you a little sheet of paper. They have you come up and the captain comes up and gives you a little speech and all of that. But on the day-to-day living, as far as I saw, it was a lot of the division officer I said I would come back to, for instance. He was shocked. I remember him being shocked that I knew what the word facetious meant. I also remember that he lied on one Christmas. We were out at sea, and he had everybody. He had contacted everybody's families without telling them, and invited them to send gifts for Christmas. Then he comes to me, so everybody he brings everybody up, and everybody's opening their presents from home, and they're getting all these gifts. He comes to me and he says, "I did, you know, I reached out to your mother, but." You know, I know she's a Jew, so I guess she didn't feel like she wanted to send something for Christmas. So he gave me a model of a ship that he bought in the ship store and said, happy, you know, or Merry Christmas. So, of course, when I told my mother, she was like, of course, I wouldn't have done that. Of course, he's lying. Of course, I would have sent you, you know, first of all, she didn't even care about Hanukkah and Judaism and all that. She didn't care about Christmas. She would have, of course, sent her son something, but he's a liar. So, dude is a liar. And you know, anyway, that's the kind of, he also chewed tobacco, by the way, which was another little, you know, that was pretty shady. But there's a lot of stuff like, you know, for a lot of people, myself included, this is the first time being on board where you see now that you're meeting people from other parts of the world. I never met a Filipino before I was in the Navy. I didn't understand the dynamics between Haitians and Dominicans and Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and Panamanians and Colombians. I didn't understand any of that until I started meeting people in the Navy there as well. Speaking of my mother, she came on board to visit. The one time she came on board to visit, and I remember this black friend of mine saw her and assumed that because she was white that she was my girlfriend. He asked if my mother was my girlfriend, and I was like, "Nah, that's my mother." He was like, "Word?" I was like, "Yeah, that's yeah." It's like, that's gross. That's gross. Plus, I don't date white girls. I think that's it. Those are most of the scenes. You know, there's some descriptions and other stuff about them that I didn't really get to, but I'm pushing 2 hours here. That's long enough for now. But I did just want to sort of lay out some of that and I think offer up some opportunity or some potential to tell some different kinds of stories. You could really use the experience of what happens in the enlisted ranks to really expose not only what the military is doing, but the political economy of it all as well. The colonialism that's involved in how people end up there, obviously the class and race dynamics of who's populating. You know, it was obvious when I was there that overwhelmingly the cooks and when I did I forgot what they used to call them, but you're sent to work for other elements of the ship when you're lowly ranked, and I spent several weeks during Desert Storm. I forget how long, because I was working. There was a 3 months period during Desert Storm where I did not see the sun because I was working the night shift. So I think this was it, because I was working in the officers' kitchen, in the sinks, I was the dishwasher in the officers' mess. And I became tight with these two brothers that worked in that kitchen there, and I got to eat well. That was the cool part, because I got actually well cooked meals that were made for me in particular, because I was working that closely with the actual chef for the officers. But I was in rooms with no windows, working all night long, sleeping well into the evening, well past sundown, and literally didn't see the sun for months. But you see that, all the cooks are black. It's like all the more menial jobs in the military seem to be populated by black people. overwhelmingly by percentage of population, there's more Black and so-called people of color than are represented, in society. And then even among whites, everybody's poor. There are no rich whites doing that stuff. There's no rich whites down there, coming from rich communities down there. There's all kinds of people escaping all kinds of horrific conditions because they want education. For some is somewhat possible, but mostly they want healthcare. Some do it just because it's, a thrill and something that, whatever, but mostly it's about healthcare and having no other option. By the way, I said I would come back to this. My apprenticeship didn't work out because because what they want for you, they tell you 6 months on board, you can pick your job and then get sent wherever you want. But what they don't tell you is that to get the job you want and be sent to the school, you have to earn enough hours in that job and pass a test that no one is teaching you but yourself. So, for instance, I wanted to do, at one point I decided I wanted to work with the air wing so I could work on the flight deck and do all this other kind of stuff. But what I was having to do is work my full 12 to 18 hour shift in my regular job. Then on my own time, put in hours on the flight deck, which I only did for maybe a week. And then I would have to learn everything by asking people, hey, can I just hang around and pick things up? And then I would have to go and pass a test and then get sent to so at that point I was like, I'm working all day. Then you want me to go up here and I got to hang around and follow these people around on the flight deck, which is cool, but not cool after I've worked 18 hours or 12 hours or 16 hours and got to get up and do it again. And I very quickly realized this isn't going to work. This isn't realistic, and ended up staying as a gunner's mate. And I was like, I'm just going to do my time and get out anyway. So that was that. Anyway, let me interesting. Make this a BPM segment, have one or two Hey, so I'm very open to this. So if there are others who have served, women in particular, Black women in particular, I'd be very happy to hear from you and set up another segment on this. I think that's a great idea. Me and my brother was in the Marines. I was admin, and we'd be in the office from before sunup and then get off. So yeah, no windows. Yeah, that's no joke, man. That's no joke. And I don't know that I thought about it that much at the time, but it's clearly not, yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's something I just think about all the time. And I admit, I think more about the 4 years I was in the Navy than I would think I would after so many years. I mean, it was personally a very powerful, experience. Now I will say some of the good, I have to acknowledge that some of the good was I was headed in a not in a good direction. I did not have any direction. I was getting arrested. I was getting kicked out of my house. I was, had no plan. So on some level, I had not, sat down to study and by the time I left and got out of the Navy, I was very much different politically. The latent radicalism that had been sort of, in the atmosphere of my childhood was fully triggered. And I had somewhat of a plan. Like I knew, okay, I gotta, find my way to college and work this out and develop a plan. So it did give me some time to get myself together. I did get to travel. I did get to see some of the world. I did get to learn, I think, more about the realities of this world than I would have if I didn't get, so there are some, but it's just not something I would have preferred to get that experience and that wisdom without what I still feel like was a largely a traumatic experience. Just the conditions alone, and then to think about, never mind all of the, yeah, I said sand. That was his line. I said sand. You can't be mad, Black people. I said sand first. There was another part. There was an officer that got jumped. Two things. There was an officer that got jumped because there was a part, the ship is big. That's another part that's very interesting. Aircraft carriers are big. And there were, there were rumored areas that people shouldn't have gone to. And one of them, an officer went there and got jumped. We found out, I'm not sure if my memory serves right, if these two incidents were connected, but there was another officer who was like shaking down people for their paychecks. That, saying like, if you don't pay me, I won't give you this hookup on a duty, or I'll make your life worse. By the way, I can't believe I skipped this one. When we came back from Desert Storm, here's another thing enlisted people might you could consider. A man was killed by his wife and her new lover. She had taken a lover while he was out at sea. We come back from Desert Storm. He goes home, and I think that night or the very next day, he's killed. And they got caught, and they were trying to get him out of the picture and keep his benefits. And go on with the new couple in their happy lives. So that's, yeah, the 90s was something else. No doubt about it. Yeah, I did twice. And I remember being very, very clear. Like, I'm going to slap him. And I was thinking, if I punch him, he might fold or quit or whatever. But if I slap him, he has to get up. And I don't want to fight him in the kitchen, because I want to get him away from everybody. So in my mind at the time, I'm thinking like, I'll slap him, I'll get him outside, and then he's over. Like, I was so clear. I've never felt that way before. Even as much as I've been enraged and been in some conflicts here or there, I've never been so clear like this. I'm gonna kill this dude. I'm gonna kill this dude tonight. Yeah. My man Fleming is no longer here. I'm gonna check with my man Mac. He was there that night, Malik, and see if he remembers it that way. But in my mind, I was so clear. I was like, my father just died, and now you want to talk about how black people ain't this and black people aren't that. He didn't come out with something crazy. He didn't go full blown N-word. But it was like, that's why Mexicans do this. And I looked in and I said to the guy who was there with his wife, I said, you gonna let him talk about you this way in your kitchen? And then he said, and black people, and that's, he said something about black. He was drunk. He thought he was, saying something. I remember that little smirky little face. And I was like, oh. No, I didn't observe anything. We were not, that's what I was like. That's my mother. A few times when I was a kid, she would have a Seder to like for a friend to like, so she could see, she could show it and whatever and show another, but she didn't believe in any of this stuff. She was so anti-religion. Her thing was read the Bible because it's a well-written book, but it's total. I mean, that was it. It's total fake nonsense. I don't believe in none of it. But in this moment, I think she just panicked and was like, our relationship was at its lowest point. I had just, like I said, I've been thrown out, been arrested. Maybe another time I'll tell the whole story about me being kicked out. But I mean, it was a hostile, it was not a good situation. And I think she, like I said, she said, you can't come home. You can leave the Navy, but you can't come back here. But at that point, she was like, okay, he's there. And I think she just was like, I'm, worried about him. And I don't think he's ready for all of that. And so I want to do what I can to help. And it was the exact opposite. It made everything worse. It made everything worse. Because I was getting joked, but I also didn't respond well to all the jokes. I've never, I didn't have a mature adult response to the dozens. So there was a lot of hostile, words and this and that, and we not cool and FUs and, and you don't understand the situation, but looking back, I mean, how could there not be jokes? And of course they're like, some of them were like, I've been here for years and never even seen the captain. Like the one I said, who wrote me that citation. I never even saw that man. Maybe unless he was walking by somewhere. But to be brought up and have dinner in his stateroom was unheard of. And within my first couple weeks, I was already up there. And then, so they are, so of course the whole thing, oh, see, the Jews get to do whatever. And it was just a whole, it was wild. It was wild. There's not a prison on the ship. They do have, if I remember correctly, they have like a small holding cell of some kind. They have, they do have military police on board. They do have, Marines on board. So, if you're out at sea and something goes down, they have a place to lock you up, and then they either take you to another port, the nearest port and the base there, and have you dealt with, or you wait till you get home, back to your home port, and they deal with you there. Yeah. Yeah, they tell you that to scare you. Oh yeah, to scare you. The whole thing about getting locked up and all that. You can also get incarcerated on ships in water for 5 days. Yeah. You can. Yeah, the captain has a lot of power out there. You talk about the boys that jumped overboard. Yeah, they survived. I never knew. Like I said, I never saw. I never saw any relationships. Nothing was out. Again, this was just at the time of Bill Clinton's "Don't Ask, Don't Tell." So there was nobody. The two men I'm talking about came as close as I saw to people say being, where it was everybody. Everybody understood they were gay. They just never came out and said it. They never, but. When they would be joked, or if somebody said something, they would sometimes just be like, and again, it wasn't polite. It wasn't welcoming, but at the same time, there was never, with those two that I saw, there was never any kind of overt hostility. There was never any kind, they were just, again, sort of like not in a clique. But as I said, my mother read that article years after I left that said there were the Jackie O's organization. So there may have been, yeah, we did not have the best uniforms. I think the Marines have the best uniforms, and our joke used to always be, because you're always the first ones to get shot up, so you get the nicest uniforms. But the Navy uniforms were always designed, at least as they told us, for practicality. The bell bottoms and all of that had flotation purposes in case you found yourself in the water. But yeah, the Navy uniforms sucked. That's why we were always trying to get in flight deck uniforms, where at the time we got the sort of like the Army green pants and the flight deck boots and the colored shirts. That was fly. The blue dungarees and the button down, blue tops, and then the white uniforms, all that was just ugh, and the white hats, ugh. So it was always the ball cap, or something, like that. Oh, damn. A CB almost died of drink. Wow. Yeah, this is, I mean, it's dangerous. Like we had, just being out at sea, we had a couple people like jumped overboard. People almost got sucked into the jet intake. One person during Desert Storm did die of a heart attack. The other guy got killed by his wife and her lover. Like I said, the Liberty boat turned over on the USS Saratoga, killing 30 plus people. So like it's dangerous out there just in general. Like, we're always, you're walking on catwalks. It always, I almost got blown off the flight deck one night. We're supposed to go around and take the temperatures, I think, of the, what were we doing? We had to go check the gun mounts on the flight deck, on the catwalk. And sometimes I used to always like to, when it was appropriate, you could cut across the flight deck. And I always thought it was kind of cool to be like, I'm walking across the flight deck in the middle of the ocean. Well, but if you don't have your head on the swivel, you're not paying attention, as I was not. They weren't doing full flight ops, but they were turning a jet. It kind of revved up the engine just a little bit to give a little gas to move. And that little bit of wind caught me as I was walking towards the catwalk. And all of a sudden I felt myself, moving faster than I was in control of. And then you see the edge of the catwalk. It was at night. And then you see right on the other edge of that catwalk is the Atlantic Ocean, 90 feet down. And for, you know, so I kind of just got low, and sort of jumped down into the catwalk, holding on to the ledge. And, you know, that was that. But it was, you know, for a couple seconds there, I was like, oh, you know, so it's a dangerous place. Like, it's all just, you know, it's all just, and yeah, the military is prison. I mean, it's definitely a way for them to deal with people that are on the border of, you know, serving that purpose of creating wealth from inside a prison. Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. We did have, you know, there's footage of it. I even tweeted a couple weeks ago of one of the planes on our ship got, you know, the landing gear wrecked when it took off and had to land by being caught in the. So that, I mean, that's the other thing. Like, the people who actually maintain all of the cool stuff don't get the attention. So they had to land the plane, catch it in that net, and then they threw it overboard, stripped it of all of its computers and all that stuff, threw the shell overboard, and we got to shoot at it with the 50 cal, which was pretty cool. Yeah, I believe that. Oh yeah, Lady Mosley, you were in the military. Definitely hit me up. Let's wrap. Let's wrap. Let's do another show on it. I'd be very happy to hear your stories and your experiences. Yeah, we even have a friend of the family who was a Navy pilot who had to eject out of a plane. And it was interesting. I don't know. I don't have authority to tell these full stories, but one time, because he's actually a friend of my wife, and one time we got to hang out with him and his Navy officer buddies, and it was the first time I saw officers in that kind of setting. And I was like, I was really unimpressed. I was like, yeah, this is what I thought, because they acted. I know they were smarter than they were behaving there, but they were just like college frat boy types. And I was just like, oh man, this is why I can't be in here. I can't, this is who I got to be in, you know. I was like, ugh. Anyway. So listen, that's my E3 and below. That's the outline. Those are the notes I've been working with. There are a few more in here, but you know, I think we covered a bulk of it. I think there's a lot of fascinating stories and a lot of stuff that should be talked about and told, even in this form. To offer some juxtaposition to these highly propagandistic films. That's, as much as I say, even as I like them, they are effective. They don't represent what goes on. And that's why, and I'll end here, that, you know, thanks to the late John Judge, I got to do a little bit of counter recruitment work going into some high schools in DC to talk to high school kids who were getting the pitch from the military, and just telling them a little bit about what's real. Like, if you want to go in, at least go in a little more clear about what's happening. What the recruiter is telling you is often a lie, or at least you know, a positive embellishment of the facts, and you know, cleaning up of the facts. And you have to be a little more clear about what's going to happen. You don't get as much GI benefits as you might think. You don't get as many VA benefits as you might think, depending on how much you serve. You don't get to, you know, your service isn't always where and how you want to be. They don't tell you the part about, as I had to do, literally cleaning the floorboard of the ship with a toothbrush while white officers and their children walk around taking tours. That was one of the more demeaning moments I'll never forget. Or serving the children of white officers, their food, and having them, you know, talk to you with that kind of the children talking with that kind of authority and entitlement to grown men, you know, serving them food, that kind of stuff, the demeaning, you know, being told I can't use the toilets of officers that I'm there to clean, like that. I'll never forget that kind of stuff. But the movie shows you they're all high-fiving, and they have their favorite enlisted person that they're nice to. And they're, you know, the sort of black helper, the chief, that's really cool, you know. But speaking of which, I got to say this too: the people that I've shouted out, I'm sorry for forgetting this: Malik, Mac, Paul Fleming, Mike O'Connell. I got to shout out Chief Bundy, Chief Bundy. I got to shout him out. White guy from Pennsylvania. Oh man, I got one more story to tell. I got to tell this story. Oh my God, I got to tell this story. This has to go in. This has to go in. And in fact, I got to show you guys something. Oh my God. Oh my God. So when I first got there, right? Oh my God. How could I forget this? When I first get there, our division was run by First Class Petty Officer E6, John Mulehi. I'll never, ever, ever forget this. This white man, I don't even know. You've seen, unfortunately, maybe some of you have had to deal with a man like this in real life, but you've definitely seen him in films. Like, he's a classic character, that he is the heavily traumatized PTSD survivor from Vietnam, who was also a hero to the Navy, as I'll show you in a second, for having survived a turret explosion on another ship in the 80s. Highly, highly PTSD-ridden, traumatized dude, was in charge of my division when I first got there. Little bit tall, thin, white dude. He in Vietnam was in those little PT boats, I think, that the Navy used to go up and down the rivers, like you saw in Apocalypse Now. That's what he was doing. So he's traumatized from that. Traumatized from the 80s turret explosion before he got to the Kennedy. Oh my God. How could I forget? This is where this story has to get told. This dude had a little gap in his front teeth, kind of taller than me, so maybe 6'3", 6'4". This guy, why can't I find? He's not in here, but I wanted to find the because I got to show you my Chief Bundy. This guy, this was my guy. I got to give it to him. Mulehi, this dude, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, he goes, so as I said, I got there in January of 1990. He's in charge of our division. By August, and he's like a lunatic. He's not made really in the first few months we're there. He's not really like focused on, he doesn't care about like the day-to-day stuff we're supposed to be doing. He doesn't care about, all he wants to do is sit back and talk about how, you all got it lucky. You haven't been to war. You don't know what it's like. All this stuff they have us doing is nonsense. They don't even let us carry real guns. They don't let us, we're in the weapons department and we don't get to carry, we run the ship's armory and we don't get to carry guns and have guns on us. They let only the Marines do that. He was just always talking like that. And then when we got told in August that we're going to Desert Storm, his insanity went to another level. His PTSD kicked fully in. Dude went nuts. People are already going crazy. Like, I remember one white dude in our group, two or maybe two, started shaving their heads like, we're going to war. Like, we got to go get these. And Mulehi was fully pushing this. Like, he was putting all the batteries in the back. He started breaking the rules of the ship and told us, he put a 45 on his hip, started walking around and started telling us, check a gun out of the ship's armory and carry it. And I was like, nah, I feel like we're probably not supposed to do that, because we were always told strictly that the Marines are only people who walk around armed. He starts walking around with a 45. He starts going through all these like special, he's like going through all these, like, you think he's going through all these wartime checks. This is the guy, his picture's not here, but this is what I found online about him. John Mulehi, awarded this citation from the USS Iowa, where for heroism in connection with the events following the explosion of Turret 2 in the USS Iowa on April 1989. Despite heavy black smoke, Petty Officer Malahi entered the darkened magazine sprinkler station and actuated the turret magazine sprinklers, which surely prevented additional detonation of ordnance. They were actually going to make a TV movie about him at one point. Finally, he assisted in post-damage assessment, and he did all this like heroic stuff, but he was completely he was out of it. So I got to shout him out, because eventually, before we actually deploy, I think, to Desert Storm, here's the division officer. This is the guy right here that lied to me. This guy. He's not a good guy. But this guy, Chief Bundy, I got to shout him out. Shout out to Chief Bundy. He's now a Master Chief, which is the highest rank you can go in the enlisted. Leon, that's right, Leon Bundy. I never really, because I always knew him as Chief. I was never talking to him by his first name. He has even contacted me twice since I left, including once recently, and more or less says very nice things. He's like, look, he even said, look, he said as I was getting ready to leave, I'll never forget this. This is a white guy from Pennsylvania. He caught me messing up, caught me sleeping. He caught me, probably could have gotten a gun decking charge, which is a very serious charge for not doing some of my duties right. He really looked out, because he understood, you can't just punish everybody every time when overall they do good work and they're good people. So he was like, look, I always know, like Ball, you're not, I'm not a motivated, I'm not going to be here doing a career. But he was always like, look, I think you're smart. I think you have a lot of potential. I think you should go out and do good work. I'm supportive of you. I don't want you to get in trouble while you're here. You got to go out and do good work. I got to shout him out for that. And then he even reached out again recently to say, I followed your work a little bit. He said, look, I don't always agree with you, but I really appreciate the way you present information, the way you stand up for what you believe in, and blah, blah, blah. I'm proud of you. And I wrote back to him. I told him, I didn't even think, I said, after all these years, I was only there for 4 years, 3 years with him, and haven't seen him since 1993. I got to admit, I thought that was a nice thing, because I said to him, I said, after all these years, I wouldn't have even thought you would remember me, because you lead, you're in charge of so many different people that come and go for 30, 25 years now. And he was like, no, I've never forgotten you. I've always, always kept up with you, think, you blah, blah, blah. So I appreciate it. So shout out to Chief Bundy. He could have really messed me up if he wanted to. He was a buffer, because when he got there, he got rid of Malahi. He outranked him. He was like, this dude is insane. Let me get everything organized. He could see we were all stressed, because the stress of going to war, the stress of not knowing what's going on, the stress of this guy running all over the place, talking about get your guns, get ready. We don't know what's going to happen. They're going to attack us. He's like totally like, so Bunny got there, was like, all right, everybody calm down, get everything in check. Focus on what you need to focus on. We're going to make it through everything. He did everything that you're supposed to do as a leader. He stood up for people when the barbershop, man, shout out to Chief Bundy. I got to shout him out, man. When the barbershop told, it wasn't me, but somebody black in our division came back from the barbershop and was told that the barbers there wouldn't cut hair because they couldn't cut black hair. Chief Bundy blew up, went up there, cussed everybody out, challenged, and made everybody, he was like, and the whole thing was, again, it's not some radical John Brown thing. It's the positive end of what a basically decent human being in this situation does. He's like, look, and what a good military person does, obviously. I'm not interested in you not liking black people. I'm interested in you making sure the people that work for me and work with us on this ship are taken care of. So you either learn how to cut black people's hair, or we got to figure something else out. But at no point should somebody be told that they can't get a haircut in the ship's barber. So, again, for all that I would say about the hostility of the races and all that, that was very real. The hostility just in general, that was very real. This dude, Chief Bundy, was a definite exception to the rule. Now, it wasn't on some level of, like I saw, like an Anton Fisher and all these other things like that. but it was, just like and the reality is, if you're talking about enlisted ranks, and this is one of the reasons why even in films like Top Gun, they have to give a little shout out to the chiefs, is because all officers in the Navy know that without the chiefs are the most experienced, most talented, and actually know how to do everything on the boat more than anybody else. And without them, things really do fall apart. So, and that's why a master chief and chiefs in general, like you really got, like even officers, like to mess with them, you really got to start. Something serious has to happen. They're largely untouchable and have earned the right to be through putting up with all this stuff for so many years and learning everything that they would have to learn. So anyway, shout out to Chief Bundy. I got to shout him out though. Yeah, there was a lot of Navy Marine nonsense. And yeah, the Marines go out and do what they were always telling us, you just give us a ride, you're just giving us a ride. And I used to always say, yeah, that's it. I don't want to be first on the beach. Congratulations. You're all idiots. Go get shot up. That's stupid. I'm gonna stay right here and then go home. And an aircraft carrier is the safest place to be in a war because everything is designed to protect it. So anyway, no, I don't see me right. I'm not this would require like a really good writer. I would advise or contribute in some way, but it would need a good writer. Same thing with the screenplay or whatever. Yeah, mom wasn't playing. I had pushed her to the limit though. I didn't. I can't. I can't front. Anyway. All right, good people. I really appreciate this. It went longer than I thought, but I have a lot of fun. I always, I do like talking about this stuff. And I admit to thinking about it all the time. And it was a good chance to bring out the notes to talk a little bit about the real experience of being in the military. And I'm happy to do it again and to hear from others who, we can do another, hear your enlisted stories. So holler at me if you want to do that. And again, thank you all very much. Definitely be back tomorrow morning for the Remix Morning Show and all the other good things happening on the channel. Again, big shout out to everybody. Shout out to the cats that I mentioned. And I admit, I shout out to the people. I don't agree with the mission. I don't think what you're doing out there is ultimately good for the world. But I also feel like I realize why a lot of people are in the enlisted ranks. What they're looking for. They're looking for camaraderie. They're looking for family. They're looking for a job. They're looking for health care. It's definitely not first on most people's mind to go hurt other people and contribute to the imperialism of the United States. Most people, certainly that I met in the Navy weren't thinking on that level. They were thinking about their own survival, coming from some of the most horrific and oppressed communities and backgrounds that this country helps produce. And then from that picks people to put them in position to go do its war bidding. And even though I know the mission isn't to be supported or defended, and ultimately I get it that at the end of the day, it's the uniform and the institution that becomes the problem. But I don't know. On some level, I just feel bad for people who are in the position I was in. I feel bad for the people who are put in other tough positions and forced to go hurt other people or be hurt by other people, all while the real fight that needs to happen isn't really happening. So anyway, thanks for checking this out. Definitely like, share, and subscribe. Support the channel. Appreciate everybody for indulging me on this. And I hope it's helped in some way, some shape or form. And if not, we'll try again later with something else. So anyway, peace. Because like Fred Hampton used to say, we know you're willing to fight for it and it must be fought for. So let's get it. Catch you next time. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.